So today we have the presenters 104 to 114, and the first one is going to be Bonnie Peterson. She is an artist and backpacker. Bonnie Peterson has artwork at the Museum of Arts and Design in New York City and the Peggy Notebearer Museum in Chicago until August 15. I think though today we're going to go backpacking.
It's the Lyell Glacier, 1903-2003, and last September I was there on a 4-day backpacking trip to measure the glacier. Mount Lyell, 13,000 feet, is the highest peak in Yosemite National Park, California. We stood on this photo point to take the comparative glacier photos. 20 years ago, our trip leader thought this was graffiti on the rocks, but it's fire engine paint around a brass geological marker, and that sparked his interest in returning every year to take a look at the glacier. Our group met in Tuolumne Meadows, elevation 8,600 feet. It's the high country of Yosemite and the largest subalpine meadow in the Sierras, with lots of domes formed by glaciers 20,000 years ago. We hiked up the Tuolumne River to reach the glacier. Our first view of the glacier was at lunch at a place once covered by 1,500 feet of ice. That night we made base camp beyond the second ridge in the distance. The group had a factory safety worker, community organizer, 2 geologists, a videographer, and a journalist for the Sacramento Bee. The next day we climbed over room-sized granite blocks and several ridges full of these rocks left by the receding glaciers. It's getting cold up there in September, and a 20-mile-an-hour wind whipped up the closer we got to the glacier. At night, our water froze in our water bottles. Ice ages have occurred in 100,000-year cycles of cooling and melting over 12 times in the last 2 million years. And the last major glacial event in the Sierras was 20,000 years ago. By 10,000 years ago, those glaciers had all melted. So today's glaciers are left over from the Little Ice Age of the 16 and 1700s. That's when glaciers overran towns in Switzerland and forced the Vikings out of Greenland. The east and west lobes of the Lyell Glacier are about half the size of their Little Ice Age maximum. This is how Yosemite looked 20,000 years ago. The twisting glacier on the left was forming the famous walls of Yosemite Valley. On the right side of the map, Mount Lyell is circled, and its glacier headed off in the direction of that arrow for 40 miles. Glaciers are defined by their ability to move. It's a mass of ice large and heavy enough to flow like a very thick fluid. The old snow under the weight of new snow changes from a fluffy mass of ice crystals into dense, hard ice. As soon as we stepped on the glacier, we saw streams of water melting and draining off. It felt like walking on a snow cone. There were lots of rocks all over the top. But the real action's taking place underneath, where the glacier's weight is eroding rock and carving out a valley. When the water melts off the glacier, it has lots of small particles of silt and mud suspended in it. That's called rock flour, and it causes the milky green color in this high elevation lake we passed on our way down to base camp. That's called glacial milk. The water trickles down to the interior of the glacier through crevasses like this big crack in the ice. As the glacier moves, it picks up large pieces of rock and debris and pushes the rocks forward as it advances like a conveyor belt, dumping rock to both sides along the way and at the end of the glacier. And those pushed up ridges are called moraines. We were really excited to find this moulin, as in Moulin Rouge, red windmill in French. It looks like a sideways windmill or airplane propeller drilled this hole. And Greg Stock, the Yosemite geologist, was pretty surprised when he measured it to be 7 meters deep. The next day, we climbed the McClure Glacier, and the whole time I'm imagining how a billion-ton ice cube rearranged the landscape as it slowly ground its way downhill. Having 2 geologists with us meant we could ask them enough questions about the ice ages to satisfy our curiosity. It turns out that ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica have trapped air bubbles with CO2 in them. And today, carbon dioxide is 27% higher than any time in the past 800,000 years. That means we're in a warming period unlike any since the dinosaur days. After hiking for a few hours, we climbed around a very large ridge and were surprised to suddenly come upon the stunning lake and the McClure Glacier behind it. We had lunch there and started looking for the photo points. And a couple of other really neat things we found were this table rock on the left and a cave opening at the foot of the McClure Glacier formed by water melting down through the glacier. You can see the rock scouring lines on the snow above Greg as he's laying there on the bedrock in the cave. We carried a GPS unit across the glaciers to get another measurement. A new 3-year study using ice-penetrating radar will help predict when the glaciers will disappear by measuring their depth. But why does it even matter how much or when the glaciers melt? Well, glaciers store about 75% of Earth's fresh water, and our glacier is storing water for San Francisco. The glacier keeps melting all summer long, even after the winter snow is melted, sending water to this big reservoir. And California is in its 3rd year of drought. Well, the journalist wrote a Sunday magazine piece about our trip. The videographer made a few videos. And I made this 4x4 foot embroidery of the glacier's topographic map. I included the words of John Muir and Israel Russell, who hiked here over 100 years ago and wrote about the glacier also. Thanks for listening.
Sharon down here just said to me, why don't we ever take vacations like that? Well, I think one, Sharon, they don't have room service. That's for me. Bonnie, are there shops there? And there's not much architecture to look at, right? Although that table did look kind of cool. Bonnie, I think, has been coming to Pecha Kucha since maybe last October, the Chicago Artist Month, and she has been very tenacious and reminded me of her existence. And I'm thrilled to finally hear about this trip and your work. And I believe that Bonnie currently has an exhibit up at the Peggy Notabar Museum that is there until August 16th. So, do we see the quilt there?
Over here.
Yeah? So we should all go, right? Because it's really cool. And Channel 11 were here, I think, following Bonnie around. So she's a real global Glacier superstar. So talk to her while she's still available, not inaccessible.